show. It's .NET Rocks! Now that's what I call a Viking welcome.
Nice.
Yes.
Next comes pillaging.
That's the open source bit.
Right. Wow, we are just absolutely staggered to be here at the end of our shift of recording .NET Rocks. Mm-hmm. This is the fifth and last show that we recorded while we're here.
Right.
At NDC in Oslo, Norway. And we have a great crowd. There must be 40,000 people here. Biggest crowd we've ever had. Actually, the biggest crowd at NDC, I think, of all time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things was our booth is up in the hallway because they sold out the whole floor, which I don't think it's ever happened before in all the years we've been here.
Yeah. They needed that floor for valuable walking space.
Well, yeah,
because I don't know if you ever tried to get lunch or food, but it was really hard because everybody was walking every which way. But David Whitney is with us. But before we talk to David, let's roll the music for a little crazy thing that we call Better Know Framework. Hit it.
All right, buddy, what do you got?
So I have a story of astonishment. And I don't know whether I was my expectations of the Azure portal were too low, or it could be, or I had never actually used the services that they offer when you're trying to diagnose a problem. But I had a problem where most of our podcast websites were crawling to a halt.
Right.
And
mine. I don't run mine on your tenant anymore.
No, that's right. Yeah. He's smart. So anyway, I went up there and I started poking around and I found out that the API, we have this read-only API that is, just for podcast data. Think of it like an RSS feed, but we have other things like the guests and the guest photos and the ads and the links, things that you wouldn't find in an RSS feed. So we use this read-only API to populate the websites, you know, all that stuff. So, the API was like not responding, and therefore the web apps were just sort of hanging. And so I went and I said, diagnose the problems in the Azure portal for this web app. And I got these categories, and one of them was CPU, and it was pegged. And then it said, click here for possible solutions. Mm-hmm. So it's actually offering me a solution, and it says right there, it just says, hey, the app service plan that you're running this in is saturated. Mm-hmm. Because I took Scott Hanselman's advice and I was like, yeah, great. Move it all into one app service plan, right? Because I don't have to pay so much then. Yeah, it's great, except that they only recommend 7 or 8 services per app service plan. And I had like 15. So they said, and they offered these options. Option 1, scale up the app service plan. Okay, what's option 2? Make another app service plan and move this app service to that. So I opted for option 2. That was probably the right move because immediately, and it was only a couple of button clicks, and immediately everything started working again. And I was like really impressed because I had never had to use that option. And it also means that we're getting more popular.
Well, yeah.
You think after 20 years we're doing something right.
You never know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it is hard to tell.
You changed the engine on the back end of .NET Rocks again.
Yes.
The Spreaker engine. So we'll see what impact that has.
Not only did we move podcast providers, but we have a new website. Shout out to Daniel Heichenberg, who did the CSS for the new site, and it's really great. And I wrote it in Blazor server. It's stinky fast now. And
it looks really good on a phone.
Yeah,
it's really great.
This is just a plug for when you think what are you going to do? The Azure portal comes through and saves the day.
Awesome.
So that's what I got.
Cool, man.
Who's talking to us, Richard?
Gravity Comment Off of show 1779. Now, that's the one we did back in February of 2022. During our burst of sort of 20 years of .NET, 25 years and this was the show we did with Miguel Diaz-Casa.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Maybe you heard of him. Kind of an open source guy, just a little bit.
He dabbles in open source.
Bit of an open source guy. And our friend Arnold Axelrod, who's been on the show before as well, wrote a comment on that show. And he said, great show as always. I don't know, sucking up for getting on the show. I don't know.
Yeah.
Arnon, just call me, man. We'll put you back on. It's fine.
No need for sucking up.
It's not necessary. Regarding the funding of small open source projects, which is something that Miguel at the time talked about, I have an idea. I believe that Microsoft should have an incentive that the open source community around the .NET would thrive. So maybe they can dedicate an amount of money for this purpose and share it among the NuGet providers according to the number of downloads of that package. Of course, then other companies might be incentivized to do similar things for Java, Maven, NPM, and so forth. What do you think? I think Microsoft's got a lot of money.
I think David just took a deep breath like he really wants to jump in.
There's a reason I asked this. I brought up this comment.
Wait. Just hold your tongue because
we'll get right into it. Let me wrap up with Arnon here. Hey, Arnon, thank you so much for your comment. And a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on Facebook. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet. And there's no need to upgrade your app service plan. Just tweet it out.
Tweet it out. That's like, we've got 15 tweets back up. Split them into 2, 7 and 8. It'll be okay.
That's even better than my joke.
You like that?
All right. Yeah, it's great. You're hired.
Okay.
All right. Let me introduce David Whitney. Converting rum into code is his tagline.
Nice.
Do you have t-shirts that say that?
I should.
You should.
Absolutely a t-shirt.
Twitter at David_Whitney. David is the founder of Electric Head Software, working as an independent software consultant based in London, focusing on iterative software delivery, developer mentoring, and cultural change.
It's the last bit that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having a cultural change moment, aren't
Mostly working with London-based organizations and startups.
The rest of it's boring.
The rest of it, yeah. We don't need the rest of it. David's here. He's back. He's pissed. And he's got a lot to say. Starting with that comment.
Yeah.
Do we think it's enough?
Do we think it's necessary?
That's all I can say to that comment. Like a fund that Microsoft could possibly divvy out between people like it's some kind of charity.
Yeah. Well, and based on the number of NuGet downloads, like that sounds like a have not set up too.
Right. I love the idea. I love the fact that someone was like, this, maybe people should get paid for software.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially what Gates did with creating Microsoft, because largely software was entirely free before then, but he saw but it was always coming from the hardware vendors.
The funny thing is he was right, wasn't he? Really?
Oddly.
Because I can tell you for a fact what doesn't pay rent or mortgages, NuGet downloads.
Yeah, not a bit.
Right?
Not really. No.
You can't go to your bank and trade in 10,000 downloads.
Look at all these stars I've got on GitHub.
Right?
I need a loan.
It's really funny because Udi Dahan was talking to me last night on the boat about Poly. Poly is a product for policies for retry, resiliency.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's great. Everybody uses it. Millions of NuGet downloads, completely free. AppVNext, my company, is the shepherd of the project, but we don't make any money on that. And he's like, how can we maybe partner up so we could help with resources and maybe add make some partnership or whatever. But it's really hard, isn't it? I mean, when you have an open source product, it's not like you have a customer base that you can market to.
Exactly that.
You have NuGet downloads.
And I think it's really, really reflective of this deep cultural entrenchment in software, where it's not only do you not get paid for your open source work, but if you were to ever suggest that somebody paid you, you probably get backlash.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it time and time again. I mean, I always think in the .NET space, one of the really, really great examples of this is if you ever follow James M. South on Twitter, who runs the amazing Image Shop project. Okay. And he's very, very transparent about kind of open source funding and how much money and how many licenses that he sells. And, real short answer is not very many. Yeah. It's barely a job.
Not very much.
Right?
Yeah.
Not very much, not very many. And moreover, he gets saddled with the rote entitlement of people leaving him drive-by issues to fix his very, very well-researched free piece of software.
Yes.
As if they are customers.
Yeah. No, the correct response to that issue is, please send me your receipt and I will refund you all your money.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. What about Patreon or things like that? I mean, artists use Patreon for making and producing.
They do indeed. So it's a great analogy, isn't it? If we look at kind of the music industry and the way that the music industry funds records. Well, since the year 2000, is there any money in music?
No, there isn't.
Only in touring.
Right, we drove it down to the bottom to the point where artists have to shake tip jars to get paid for their work. And I think the reason I am pissed is I think we're at this horrible inflection point where we have normalized the fact that software is so free that actually that there's a real big power imbalance problem between the organizations that use it, the people that write it, and I don't even want to call people that consume open source software customers, the people that use the software.
They use it.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess, you look at this tip jar model, and actually if we were to use our right mind and approach it, like forget everything you know about software, well, you do some work and maybe I'll pay you.
Right.
Right,
Shareware all over again.
That's not how
it works.
You can't pay your bills on that. You can't live on that. And I think it's really important to remember when we talk about being critical of something like open software. Like I love open source software, absolutely adore it. But it's really important that we are critical of things that we love in order to make them better.
Absolutely.
Right, and we've navigated ourselves to this place where the authors of the most significant open source projects in the world struggle to pay their bills, because we've conditioned an entire generation of programmers that everything should be free.
Yeah.
And the crazy part about that, like we've driven music down to the floor, and the big successful bands do tours that are highly profitable.
Of course.
And so you get back to that 1% kind of 1%, scenario, although they've certainly democratized the ability to make music, just not to actually profit from it.
It's true.
But then again, people don't spend a lot on music either.
No.
The thing that irks me about the free software side of that is 10 of the wealthiest companies in the world at the top of this are all tech companies. Like, there's a lot of money in software.
Absolutely. And you look at people like, you look at the Amazon-shaped problems and the Docker-shaped problems where, Docker is having a whale of a time at the moment because people think it's somehow hateful that they should have to pay for Docker Desktop.
Right. And I mean,
which is just the most perverse,
right.
wrong-headed way to think about software. Everyone, we're doing a .NET Rocks live here. Everyone in this room gets paid for building software.
Right.
Do you really want to live in an industry where we devalue the very, very core asset that you build?
No.
So much so that you cannot earn a living anymore because of the expectation that everything is free.
I'm a music maker. Like, I'm a producer and a musician, and I pay for my Adobe Creative Cloud subscription every month, $100 or whatever it is, and it's worth it.
Right.
Because I get this most amazing software that I probably couldn't do my job without, and other software that I use on a subscription basis or on a one-time whatever, you pay for it.
Exactly that. And I think I came to this inflection point, and I think I've been increasingly mad over the years as I've watched people burn out. And we've all seen the XKCD of like the one library maintained by the dude in Nebraska, right? That's stacking up a $1 billion corporation.
Holding everything else up.
But, we have to think about the structural power imbalance when we look at open source, because the way that open source came about and like the original, the FSF kind of copyleft style licenses originally came from a place where people in computer clubs were sharing code with other Unixy programmers in computer clubs. And that was cool. No one ever wants to make that software go away. Right. You should always share your software with your friends.
And hence that license also was. And if you're going to work on this some more, please contribute
Please
back.
give it back, right?
Yeah.
But I like asking people if open source won. And everyone seems to think open source won. But the title of the talk that I'm going to be giving later on at this conference is all about the fact that, open source only actually won when it allowed itself to be exploited, because the GPL didn't win anything.
Right.
No.
The MIT license won.
Won everything. They make everything free.
Make everything free.
Do what you want.
Do what you want. Who cares?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, the relationship between you and your peers in a computer club is not the same power dynamic as you and the top 3 biggest grossing companies in the entire world exploiting your labor for free.
So is consulting on an open source project the way that most open source authors make their money back?
So it's one of the successful models, isn't it? But I think it's a very, very different kind of discipline. And, let's bring it back to music.
Yeah.
Should bands have to traipse around the world and gig ruthlessly just to make ends meet after they do the work? After they produce the piece of art, the actual work is not is not valued. We devalued the work, and I think we're in this place where we have devalued software. And when you devalue software, you breed entitlement. And we see it in our communities all the time because the toxicity that comes from people feeling like they are owed software and your work.
It's a vicious cycle though, isn't it? Because it's so easy to make the tools are free. You can download the tools, you can get open source tools, you can build software, you can put it out on GitHub. So the people that consume it, they're always looking for the next thing, aren't they? Exactly. So there's this huge glut of supply, right? And the demand is there, but it's not like the whole world is going to find your project and use it and stay on it for years. It's not like if you have an Adobe Audition or Adobe Premiere Pro or whatever, we have a couple competitors, but the software is so damn sophisticated that it's hard to replicate.
Exactly. And you're probably in the same kind of, the odds of you being successful are probably the same as you having a hit album.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah. Right. No, even if you're great.
Even if you're building something that you really care about. And I think we have to be reflective as a community and understand that the way we interact with the software we put out there matters. Mm-hmm. And it changes the culture in which software gets built in. Like it really, really does.
Yeah.
And, if you ethically want to interact with software, damn it, pay your friends.
Yeah.
Pay your friends to do their works because otherwise your friends won't eat. And obviously that's a bit glib and dramatic, but
But you also get to the reality, which is that these projects die because eventually they do need to eat and they're going to have to go do something. And it just may not be working on that project anymore.
You want fries with that?
Right, exactly. And God, you
that's the musician's mantra. Right?
Well, indeed. And maybe
the difference between a musician and a mutual fund?
Go on. One
matures and earns money.
Hey.
Ooh.
Sorry.
But I find it terrifying. Honestly, I think, and I've had these conversations, you dare to challenge the orthodoxy that open source, I think I've written open source for the last 25 years of my career, dare to suggest that perhaps it's not the only way that software should get made, and you will be savaged by every single person that ever created a Reddit account. You really will.
And part of the problem here is there's a whole bunch of people that are being paid to make open source software. Mm-hmm. They just happen to work for Microsoft, Google, and
exactly
Amazon.
Exactly that. And there's kind of that ethical angle where, do we really think Microsoft, Google, and Amazon engage in open source because they want to give things away? Absolutely not. And it's fine that, they do it because they realize it's an avenue for making them money.
Right.
If you're not paying for the thing, you're the product. Mm-hmm. Visual Studio Code isn't free because Microsoft love you. Microsoft are a great organization. They're a lot better than they used to be, right? And actually, they put a lot of ethical things to the forefront these days. Mm. But Visual Studio Code exists to get developer mindshare. The two things can be true at the same time. Yep. It can be a good product, and it also can make you the product. Mm-hmm. That's fine. We can accept this. But I think you end up in the situation, actually, in the more dangerous place that open source gets consumed and weaponized is in the SME, the enterprise world. And I think this is where, I had a moment of reflection that I fucked up. I spent 10 years advocating for the wrong thing.
Right.
I remember myself writing open source policies in organizations about being permissive only to MIT licenses, no copyleft, no GPL. Well, that's toxic, right? We have to do this. And I should have been advocating to pay the people that wrote the software to license the software we used. Mm-hmm. That would have been a much more effective and tolerable use of that energy than just campaigning inside an organization to, when you take 3 steps back, make my job easier by leveraging some unpaid work that I found on the internet. Yeah. That's what I was really doing. That's what I was really saying. And I remember having this epiphany, and it was oh God, we built this.
Yeah, I'm part of this problem.
Right, we're part of this problem. And it doesn't mean that writing open source and distributing free software is bad. I love open source software. Mm-hmm. Weaponizing the work of private individuals to make your small company more money? Bit more ethically grey.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Grey?
And, well,
not really.
Black.
Yeah, it's kind of black.
It's pretty dark.
It's a deeper shade of grey.
It's pretty dark.
That's for sure.
Right.
At least beyond 50.
But we all do it.
Yeah.
Right? And we've all done it. And I think unless there's a table stakes, and I want to take it back to that very, very first question, I think there's a table stakes kind of thing here for any next generation language, runtime, or environment. If billing isn't built in, fuck am I learning it? Mm. Absolutely not going to happen. I don't think anyone should. Mm. I think we should actively boycott languages that don't support funding creators as a fundamental part of the ecosystem. It's table stakes now, and I would bet that any of the new wave of languages or the evolution of existing languages will start to account for this.
Yeah, I don't know if I look at it from a language perspective, but from a platform perspective.
From a platform perspective,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. I mean, of course, it's not going to be in your programming language, right?
No.
But, like, it should be in NuGet. But it shouldn't be some optional charity fund where Microsoft bestow the willingness of their ever so kind hearts to grace creators with the pennies that fall off the side of the table,
well,
right?
Like,
it's almost an abhorrent mental image.
Mm-hmm.
They're more apt to donate resources like, access to MSDN and,
Exactly that.
Azure credits and things. And they do that for MVPs and things. But, as you're sitting here talking, I was thinking, the app developers and the app platforms have kind of got this, extortion model, right? With in-app purchases, right? Can you imagine?
Buy 30 gems for the next line of code.
Yeah, right. Can you imagine if in the software world,
Achievement unlocked.
right, we had, you want that feature? Like little Clippy pops up. Oh, you want that feature? That's going to cost you $30. Click here. Right?
But they're onto something, right?
Because
because
they made it.
What they have is, at point of consumption, a trivial means to pay.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the reason that open source doesn't get monetized really practically is the infrastructure doesn't exist.
Right.
Like if you're some person sitting in a bedroom or a home office and you come up with a good idea and you want to make money out of a library that you just built, like the taxman says fuck you, the platform says fuck you, and you give up trying to find a licensing partner and a billing person. I kind of feel like, these big tech monoliths have the burden of responsibility for, they curate these platforms. You should be able to have in your Azure bill, cool, well, here's some NuGet packages.
Right.
Well, actually, we've integrated this with Azure billing, so you can get paid.
Sure.
Right.
I mean,
Why
shouldn't
not?
this be part of GitHub?
It should be part of GitHub. It should be part of GitHub releases. It should be part of NPM.
Right.
It really doesn't matter where it is, right? Honestly.
But I'm making the point that there's only a handful of locations.
Right. And Microsoft actually, and this isn't a wailing on Microsoft. I think Microsoft are relatively in step with the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
But they have the most leverage by owning the most popular source code repository solution on Earth and the means of distribution of a lot of packages in the most popular programming environments on
I'm trying to imagine a developer using Poly, let's say, and they have the retry policy and the exponential back off, and then they want to do a circuit breaker, and oh no.
So if we get to this
You're
world,
gonna have to pay. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine, can you imagine how angry that developer is going to be?
Man, I want a Poly want a cracker.
Poly want a slap, right? It's
and the developer, but cool. Be angry.
Yeah.
Right? Be angry. No, but we should be angry. And actually, you know what? Anger exists to tell you something, right?
Mm.
I don't like the inconvenience of this. Why am I being you're not being inconvenienced. You're a paid employee of a company.
Yeah. Right.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Come to terms with your inconvenience. Go to your boss and ask them for the credit card.
I guess it's kind of like, when they banned smoking in America, in American restaurants and bars and stuff. And all the smokers were so pissed off, right? And they'd be going out on the street and complaining to each other. But
the bar owners were also afraid. It's like, those are our customers. We're about to lose customers.
Like you can imagine, this project, Poly, right? I mean, free one day. Yep. Next day, you're going to have to pay for those more advanced features.
Well,
maybe only if you have a certain number of, users or customers. Now, so we're going to put telemetry inside an open source project so we can cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
But I
don't think that would fly.
But we've been here before, haven't we? We've been here with Identity Server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we watched the .NET community, which frankly is one of the most enterprisey communities on Earth.
You're right.
Who gets paid the most. Go up in arms because their company needed to pay for licenses for an. I really can't get on board with the indignance of the individual developer in that situation.
Yeah, you're right.
Especially because they launched these products with really, really permissive licenses for the individual.
Right.
And frankly, again, a big fuck you to any business that's like, oh, well, I'm making £5 million a year. I can't pay £2,000 in licensing for a thing that would cost way more to build myself.
Yeah.
There's just no.
Critical to the infrastructure and the architecture.
Well, and finish your analogy. The reality is when they banned smoking in bars got busier.
Yep.
Yes.
Right? Like the argument here is if we built that infrastructure, if we did make that complexity, so
People
like,
would come
listen,
out.
you're making money on this software, pay for the libraries you use.
Exactly that. And I think
Wouldn't the libraries get better?
they would get better. People would be able to make a living doing things that they love. And was that not the dream? Like, I swear to God, anyone, definitely not God. It's like,
I swear to the universe.
he's not listening.
The cosmos.
Like, no one when they were 14 learning to program was like, oh, I want to meet in that, want to work in that corporate meat grinder, sending passive aggressive pull requests to open source libraries. like that was nobody's dream.
Yeah.
But it is the reality. And unless as a community we rise up and explain to big tech understands this.
Yeah.
This is not a surprise to them, right? They benefit from the current status quo. But if people start abandoning their learning platforms, if people stop abandoning their tools and libraries because actually they can't earn a living doing so, I think what we will find is we'll end up in a place where the one ecosystem that actually does embrace funding for individuals, even if the programming tools are shitter and if the platform isn't as good, if I can make a living doing it,
more work happens
why not?
there.
Let's go there.
Moving over there.
Right, let's go there.
And folks, I'm going to interrupt for one moment for this very important message.
There's always something new from our sponsor, Text Control. They just released version 30 of their document processing library that includes new document collaboration features. Using TX Text Control, you can integrate online document editing, document signing, collaboration, and PDF processing into your ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core web applications. Whether you need to create PDF invoices, quotations, or reports, TX Text Control provides the developer libraries for all document-related tasks. Check out the new features and see their technologies in action by visiting the live demo at demos.textcontrol.com.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Campbell. That's Carl Franklin.
Hey.
Talking to our friend David Whitney.
Still here.
A little bit about making open source better.
Yeah. This is how we make it better. It's how we make it more ethical.
I just want to poll the audience here. And when I ask you, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because this is a podcast. So by clapping of hands, how many people would actually pay for more advanced features of an open source project if they knew it was going to affect their bottom line in a positive way? And how many people would not?
Chickens.
Whoa, wow. So you're either full of shit or this is a really good indication that people are willing to pay.
This is a fairly peer-pressured environment.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
It is, but you know
Get
what?
that guy!
But here's the thing, you know what? Like, I remember writing the talk I've written about this, and I was terrified to even give it.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's so close to heresy to be like, oh, this stuff we've all grown up with and like value, and oh yeah, open source one, oh, maybe problematic. And I just think it takes a lot to be reflective in software, and especially because a very very fast-paced industry, actually stopping and thinking.
Hasn't the pandemic helped all of this? Like, you've definitely seen people reflect on work in a very profound way.
We have,
and the power of the worker to this en masse changing your mind. Like suddenly, everybody that got forced out of work when the lockdowns happened and then retrained into something else, they're not going back to their old job now that the lockdowns are over, right? It's like, surprise.
Yeah,
I told you this story. My brother, Jay, he works as a software developer. In Java.
Try not to hold it against him.
I know. Brilliant. He's way more brilliant than I'll ever be. He basically came to a band rehearsal one night and he says, I'm coming to terms with the fact that I'm never going back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
Because, he'd been working from home because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And they're shutting that facility down.
Yeah. Makes no sense anymore.
Makes no sense.
Well, and especially for developers, like, you're more productive working in a controlled space.
Right.
Preferably your own.
A place that matches your preference.
Yeah.
Right? That maps to your mental model.
Yeah, it's an interesting truth.
A place where you can go to work at 10 o'clock at night and feel good about it.
Yes.
A place for us to dream.
8 solid hours of not wearing pants.
And have a beer. Have a Miller.
But, I do think that, you're hitting this point of this aspect very hard right now because we have all been reflective. And it's like, this is unfair and counterproductive. You've now seen what happens when people change en masse. If a bunch of these maintainers have had enough, we're going to lose a whole bunch of code that people really depend on. Are you going to continue to use it? If AppVNext pulled out of Poly,
then what happens?
What happens?
Somebody else would be right there to shepherd the project.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah,
with no money in it, just an obligation.
Yeah,
right. Like, what's the upside?
It's the running joke, isn't there? I wouldn't wish a successful open source project on anybody.
Yeah,
like welcome to free work. Cool.
Well, and constant criticism.
Yep.
Right. Like it's not just that you're not being paid for your work. It's that people are very angry while not paying for your work.
If you want to tell me to go fuck myself, pay me.
Yeah. I am way more agreeable.
This is what .NET Rocks has come to. This is great.
It's going to be my epitaph.
Yeah, that's right.
After I get stabbed by, I don't know.
Richard Stallman
in the hallway outside.
That's it. Slings out of the ceiling. Boom, you're done.
But it's really interesting you mentioned like a character like Richard Stallman, because the funny thing about the kind of licenses that power most of open source, the text files that come with the binaries.
Right.
Is
the unenforced.
They were written by a set of people at a time who believed that software freedom was more important than freedom from exploitation. And they were wrong.
Yeah.
And that's allowed. You just have to try to do better.
You can believe that, but it's not good enough.
Well,
right?
But they would also, you could also argue, they'll argue back. It's like, you never did what we said. The whole thing was copyleft.
Yep.
Right. And that never came to pass. So we've never actually manifested.
And ironically, the truth is that copyleft accidentally provides some form of protection against the kind of exploitation that we now see.
Yeah, I don't know if it's accidental. I think that was the intent.
That was the well,
except that it got undermined.
But it was about software freedom,
right?
And that like the word freedom really meant something to us.
Like
it was intentional, right?
Face paint,
it was intentional. Yeah, it was intentional. And I remember when I was like a teenager reading, the phrase, and I don't know if anyone in the audience here has heard the phrase "free as in speech" rather than "free as in beer."
Right.
And I think it took me about 10 years to work out what the fuck they were talking about, because they could have said it clearer.
I heard free like beer or free like a puppy.
Free at the point of consumption would have made a lot more sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Copyleft licenses, ironically, are a good defense against this, but I think the motivations are wrong. And actually, I feel like we're on this precipice, and you're seeing examples of people trying to work out new license formats that kind of capture the license we really want to write is, sure, have the code. Yes, use it for teaching. Of course, look at my stuff. Fuck you, Microsoft and Google and Amazon, if you're going to steal my shit and make money out of it.
Yeah.
That's the license people actually want to write.
Or really anybody else.
And you see Elastic trying that. Elastic have been trying to do that. Like, this is a real existential threat to these businesses who are afraid of being eaten up.
Mm-hmm.
And, it is the right of individuals that create works to be able to make money. I didn't believe I would ever be arguing for, like, hardline capitalism. Like, it's really depressing as, like, an extremely left-wing person.
No, but if you work...
how do you survive late-stage capitalism? You charge people for your fucking labor.
That's basically it. You work, you get paid.
Yeah. Because in the meantime, there is actually a war going on between these tech giants in the open source community with all of their paid employees.
It's open source washing.
Well, that's part of it, but it's also, when Microsoft jumped on board with Chromium, right now they're all contributing the same thing. Like, it basically is a way to create a monopoly that nobody can be angry with.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the meeting where all these tech giants basically get the finger guns out at each other on features in Chromium, right? Like, it must be very entertaining.
Or when Brendan Burns went to Microsoft. I mean, this was the guy who led Kubernetes for Google. It's not like Google, now you've got that public eye on Google. It's like, are you really going to take away that guy's rights to accept pull requests into Kubernetes? He did lead the project. He's just now working for your arch rival.
He's being a bit Kubernaughty.
But I mean, we also wanted that monopoly. Like we wanted an orchestrator. Remember, there used to be a bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
The DCOSs and so forth. And suddenly Microsoft's implementing Kubernetes and Amazon's like, oh, geez, don't leave us out. So now they've implemented it. And it may or may not have been the best one. Pretty sure it wasn't the best one. So suddenly we had this VHS versus Betamax reference. If you're old enough, where VHS was not the superior tape format, Beta was. But VHS was freely available to any company to manufacture units from, and so they did. And so the network effect took over.
I feel like you've been saying that exact sentence since VHS and Betamax.
Pretty much.
Yeah, just
All right.
let me tell you about those formats.
Yeah.
For those who are younger, Blu-ray versus DVD HD.
Right.
I just threw away a DVD HD player in the garbage because you cannot give it away.
No, it's
because
not worth
it's
anything.
complete paperweight.
So suddenly we have a monopoly with Kubernetes, which also meant we got an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Everybody started working on Kubernetes. So Helm and this like array of great
Monopolies
tools.
are great for coherence.
Yeah.
Ironically.
And the fact that but it's not owned by a company. It's a set of open source projects. Like this seems to be the best part of this. The only problem being most of the contributors to Kubernetes all got paid because they work for Google or Microsoft.
So you see organizations like the CNCF starting to kind of exist in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never,
Can you explain
sorry,
that
the
acronym?
Cloud Native something Foundation.
Okay.
Computing. Thank you
Yes.
very much. And I guess that their position is to try and be the stewards of these things in the open away from corporate desires, except they are kind of corporately sponsored and
Well, they've got to be funded
it's complicated,
too,
isn't
right?
it? Right? Everyone needs to get paid.
Yeah. Well, and you look at who's on the W3C
Exactly.
and you look at who's in the ECMA specification. It's like they're all tech giant employees.
I think we have to be careful about these, and you know, I'm sure the people that work for the CNCF are doing the best work they can, but we have to be very, very conscious that it's another way of describing a quango of large tech organizations almost gatekeeping what then emerges as a standard.
Mm-hmm.
Like they kind of lock down what people can make money out of if they do a land grab and make it free. It's and maybe it's good and maybe it's bad.
Well, and you
And
hope that
honestly,
all
I don't
these-
know how I feel about it yet.
Yeah, I mean,
But it's an interesting kind of change in shape.
yeah, as long as the rivals are all on the panels, we're hoping we're better representative, except
Exactly that.
they're all rivals. The one thing they have in common is they don't have anything in common with you.
Yeah, exactly
Well,
that.
I'm thinking of price fixing, right?
Yeah.
Price. If a bunch of companies that have a monopoly together on, I don't know, canned pineapple
Yeah.
get together and say, you know, canned pineapple, we're charging 79 cents a can. Why don't we all raise it to $1.79?
Yeah.
That's completely illegal.
Yeah, there are laws against that, and
Right.
it has happened, and it's
But is
been stopped.
the tech equivalent of that what we're talking about here? Is it so subtle that it slips under the radar of the law?
I think we're skirting around it a little bit because I think to describe it that way makes it sound like a nefarious, deliberate move. And I think there's more egalitarian purpose. So, you know, in technology, some degree of standardization always helps, right? Interoperability is
that's true.
important. And finding bodies that can get us in the middle there is really, really important.
well. Tell me the downside of the Kubernetes scenario. Like to me, it seems like one
It seems
of
like
the good outcomes.
and it does seem like one of the good outcomes. And hopefully in there, I mean, really, the Kubernetes experiment is all about you using their cloud vendor platforms, right? That's the make.
the real
That's
hook.
the make.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think it is totally possible for large organizations to ethically interact with open source.
Because you can also use Kubernetes on-prem. You don't have to
Right.
go to Amazon or Google or Microsoft.
And even when you're the product, they're giving you things.
Right.
Right? And there is an exchange of value that's happening there.
Yeah.
That is not organizations exploiting you.
And
That's
they're-
effectively them saying, we'll give you this stuff, you use our platform. If that's an equitable value exchange.
Right.
Right.
So in
Cool.
the end, they have to provide a valuable service and
Exactly
they have
that.
to be able to describe their services and sell them to the end user, just like every other product.
Exactly
That
that.
is actually competing on the service itself, not the Kubernetes.
And I think that's a lot better than, say, Amazon cloning Elastic's stack and just
Yeah.
deploying it internally.
Right.
And AWS have done a few fairly shitty things like that over the years, and I think they're trying to be better. And I think their track record is kind of improving. But you always have to beware when there's such a great power imbalance that they're never beyond it. You know, just because the bear isn't biting you right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because the counter to that, and we should probably dig into this with some Elastic folks at some point, was Elastic has been trying to use cloud providers to provide Elastic as a service.
Exactly that.
And those cloud providers have been an impediment to that.
And that's dangerous.
It is a slippery slope. I want my cloud provider to not be competing in that market space. They should be a utility, right? But you have this dance of, we want services from our providers.
So I think there's a wave of companies now that are starting to emerge that are trying to play somewhere in the middle here. That they are, you look at a company like Confluent with their managed Kafka, and I think that's kind of a relatively good blueprint of like, the thing is free, the stuff around it, you can run it on-prem, we provide value-added services.
Right.
That seems to me like a fairly ethical way for a medium-sized organization to form around open source and make it sustainable. I think there should probably be different rules for larger organizations, and I couldn't care less how we measure it, but when it's $1 bazillion that they make, they're in that category. And you all know who they all are, basically, right? Like, we know the ones that can really eat us all up.
Why Brazilian? Why not US dollars? How many zeros?
More zeros? How do they?
But I mean,
it's fine. I'm from the UK. Our currency isn't worth anything anymore. So there's loads of zeros. Yeah,
not yet.
We're working on it.
They're getting there. Yeah.
Yeah, but aren't you putting a new face on them all anyway?
Maybe it'd be quicker.
Isn't the logical outcome to this that Elastic gets bought by one of the three?
I don't know whether that's a depressing outcome or not.
Well,
it's a logical outcome, but does everyone really want to? Like, do you all want to work for Microsoft? I see Microsoft employees in the room. Like, yes. And again, it's like I have a lot of love for a lot of the big tech organizations. I think they do a lot of good as well as a lot of bad. But you always have to remember that with organizations that big, they are not good nor bad nor evil nor happy.
Nor neutral.
They're nothing.
Yeah, that's
right. They are a constellation of companies that are amalgamated together, and they will behave in different and unpredictable ways, and you just have to accept that. That's just the truth.
That's Marshall McLuhan's old line. Media is neither good nor evil nor neutral.
Just is.
Yeah, it is just a thing. And for better or worse, corporations exist to benefit their shareholders.
Exactly that.
Whatever you want to manifest that as.
And what I want, and looking around the room, is I want you all to get paid. Fuck the companies.
Yeah.
And I really mean that. There's the anarchy. For the companies, I want you all to get paid. And I think that's the challenge when you advocate for this kind of thing, because what I'm really doing is sitting, begging and pleading with developers that the next time you see a library you use introduce a license fee, you don't grab your pitchfork and torch and go about and try and roast them. And you think, oh, actually, maybe this is like a realistic, pragmatic way for this person to make a living that is actually a net good thing.
You know who came through the other side, or started to come through the other side of this, is news, right? That we now have some news organizations, the WAPOs and NYTs of the world, that finally said, listen, there's a paywall. Yeah. Pay us so we can pay our people.
And only after we destroyed their revenue completely, right? We drove their content to the very bottom, right?
You think about all the movies that were made about the destruction of the news industry.
Your journalists can't tour.
Yeah. And then finally, I think the society has acknowledged, we should probably be paying.
There's a few that I subscribe to because I want them to stay in business.
You want them to be there.
I appreciate their value.
Why shouldn't software be like? How far do we have to tear software down to get there?
Do we have to destroy our entire means of earning a living before people will realize that this is also happening to us?
Right.
So the best thing that I've heard from this last hour, I think, is some sort of mechanism that an open source provider or an open source like GitHub, right, needs to implement to allow us to charge our customers at a certain point, and make it as easy as one button click. When you sign up for GitHub, you create an account, you give them your credit card number. They have that already. Why not just,
so
put a button in your app to unlock a feature?
Some trivia that I remember having a conversation on Twitter with some people in the medium distant past, and they said, "Did you know that originally NuGet, when it was spec'd out, had payments built in?"
Really?
And it was removed.
Wow.
We can check with Phil Hack on that.
By request.
Yeah.
And now we had second degree hearsay from Twitter, but I buy it.
It wouldn't surprise me. I do know who to ask. I know the guys who did that, so we can go poke in and see, is this really true?
You have to tune in for that one.
Yeah, I'm going to make the call. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But times are changing, right? And maybe it's time.
Maybe it is.
Maybe it's time, and that'd be great for everybody.
Yeah, things would be better.
Our audience seems to think that's a good idea.
You like getting paid?
Yeah. It's a tough one.
And they don't mind paying for features that will inevitably affect their bottom line.
Any questions for David? Sir? Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah, well, David, what's a good financial model for this that doesn't end up with just a lottery win for a handful of lucky folks?
Oh, God. I think realistically, there's a kind of rote commercialism in there, isn't there? I don't think it's a lottery, but popular software will always make more money, right? That's just things that people want to buy will make more money.
Yeah.
And it also creates incentive for make better stuff that more people want to use.
Right.
I guess maybe you're reaching it. Maybe is there like a community distribution fund that like takes a cut of the rest and spreads it amongst authors? Maybe. I don't know whether people would be so receptive to that because, I mean, certainly, probably the Americans would think it looks a bit too much like socialism.
Or a class action lawsuit
right,
or something, yeah.
But it's also this other side of it. If you're making money from that software,
pay for it.
Some of it should go back to the people who built it for you.
As long as they don't do it like the record companies screwed the artists all those years ago.
Here's a nickel.
Yeah.
I think
like Chuck Berry, basically, they said, okay, yeah, this song, Johnny Be Good, we can give you a percentage of the royalties or a Cadillac. He's like, I'll take the Cadillac. And that's a shame.
Yeah.
I think realistically, it depends on the size of your market, the kind of the software. And, you know, we're seeing people experiment with dual licensing here, which is, and really the rise of dual licensing is people being mad at the same things, right? And reaching for the only thing they have at the moment. Mm-hmm. But it's only really available to people with the infrastructure.
And we'll do a show with Dom about the state of identity server sometime in the future.
Yeah.
But he also had customers that were asking him to make it a commercial product.
So they could buy it.
Well, because they wanted to pay for it. They wanted the rights that being a customer gave them.
Yeah.
Like, and in some ways it's oddly healthy. It's like, hey, listen, I know you're giving this away. Could you stop, please?
Yeah.
We'd like to pay for it because we want to have an opinion about how things go.
And I think that's great, right? Like, God, I wish that happened to more people.
Right.
And, you know, identity server is a great product, right? Like, the reason it's so ubiquitous is because it was good.
Yeah. It also tackles a problem that most people know enough to know you can't tackle this problem. You're not qualified. There are only a handful of Dominic Byers and Brock Allens in the world.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure there's only one of each. And they're busy. So, we should leverage. At least there's so few products that are that clearly, uniquely qualified and needed.
Yeah.
Where many others, it's the bicycle shed problem. Like everybody thinks they can build a bicycle shed. Like as long as you're building a skyscraper, everyone's like, hey, good luck with that. But everybody's got an opinion on how you make a bicycle shed. But anybody who's actually sat down and built any library of any type finds out, it's way more complicated than you think.
Sure is.
Yeah, all that software should be valued.
I think it'll be interesting if we get to a place where maybe, you know, platform vendor cuts offers additional support to the kind of people that are selling things. Like maybe maybe Microsoft. Let's really target it, right? Let's talk about GitHub and Microsoft, right? Because it's the low hanging fruit. Like maybe they could offer support for licensing and enforcement and things like that, right? Because they're a big enough company. And if they really, and I do believe they mean what they say about trying to be good, healthy custodians for the open source community.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that they are evil. I think they're just working with the position that they landed in at the time, right?
Yeah.
But they could do more.
Yeah, and we have to create that pressure. Like corporations will continue to focus on benefiting their shareholders until we show if they do more of the things we want, that will benefit their shareholders.
Exactly that.
David, what's next for you? What's in your inbox?
What's next? Spending a lot more time thinking about this, actually, honestly. Like I want to try and put together more cohesive ideas around things like business models that could fit this kind of thing. And, you know, I honestly think the more we talk about this, I'm not sitting here pretending I know the answer to this problem.
No.
I've got some ideas about what the shape of the solution might be, but it's going to take everybody collectively to make this better.
I'm really impressed. I came in expecting a punk rock, burn it down to the ground kind of attitude.
Yeah, for an anarchist, you're remarkably sane.
Remarkably sane, right? Absolutely.
It's with a wholesome core. Fuck everything, but I am British.
Yes, that's true. I'm a gentleman at heart. Give a round of applause. David Whitney. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you next time on .NET rocks! .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a toy boy. Life is hard.